There's a war happening right now. No bullets, no bombs, no soldiers bleeding out on foreign soil. But the stakes? The stakes are higher than any conflict in human history. While you're watching this video, decisions are being made in Beijing and Washington that will determine whether you retire comfortably or die in poverty. Whether your children inherit a superpower or a has-been nation clinging to memories of former glory. Whether the 21st century speaks English or Mandarin. And here's the part that should terrify you. Most people have no idea this war even exists. This isn't about politics. This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans or communism versus capitalism. This is about power in its purest form. This is about two civilizations locked in a struggle where only one can emerge as the dominant force shaping humanity's future. Welcome to the Invisible War. Welcome to East versus West. Let's go back to February 21st, 1972. President Richard Nixon steps off Air Force One in Beijing. The cameras flash. Chairman Mao Zedong extends his hand. Nixon takes it. In that moment, the Cold War's rigid boundaries shatter. America's calculation was simple. China was poor, backward, isolated. Opening trade would make them rich. And rich countries, America believed, inevitably become democratic. They would adopt Western values, join the liberal international order, and become just another player in an American-led world. It was one of the greatest miscalculations in geopolitical history. For the next 3 decades, American companies flooded into China. Factories relocated, supply chains restructured, China became the world's workshop. And something remarkable happened. Between 1990 and 2020, over 800 million Chinese people rose out of poverty. It was the fastest economic transformation any civilization had ever witnessed. But China didn't become democratic. They didn't adopt Western values. They took American money, American technology, American know-how, and they built something completely different. They built a techno-authoritarian superpower with an economy large enough to challenge American dominance. And by the time Washington realized what had happened, it was too late to turn back. The Awakening. 2018, March 22nd, 2018. President Trump announces tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods. The trade war, the first public acknowledgement of the conflict, begins. The media calls it erratic, unpredictable, a policy disaster. But behind closed doors, something fundamental had shifted. Democrats and Republicans, for once, agreed. China wasn't playing by the rules. They were stealing intellectual property, forcing technology transfers, subsidizing industries to undercut American competitors, building a surveillance state that made Orwell's 1984 look like a rough draft. The bipartisan consensus was stunning. China had become a strategic competitor, not a partner, not a potential ally, a rival. And when Joe Biden took office in 2021, despite reversing nearly every Trump policy, he kept the China strategy, expanded it actually, because this transcends politics. This is about survival, the real battlefield. Here's what makes this war invisible. It's not being fought where you're looking. You won't see it on cable news debates about Taiwan or the South China Sea. Those are symptoms, not causes. The real war is happening in places most people never think about. It's happening in semiconductor fabrication plants in Taiwan, where machines the size of buses create chips smaller than a human hair. Chips that power everything from smartphones to fighter jets. It's happening in the port of Piraeus in Greece, where Chinese state-owned companies control the gateway to European trade. It's happening in university research labs where Chinese graduate students conduct cutting-edge research funded by American taxpayers. Research that somehow ends up in Chinese military applications. It's happening in your pocket, where TikTok's algorithm, controlled by Beijing, shapes what 150 million Americans think is important, true, or entertaining. It's happening in currency markets, where China systematically works to dethrone the dollar as the world's reserve currency, a change that would devastate American living standards overnight. The battlefield isn't a place, it's everywhere. And most people don't even know they're standing on it. Pillar 1. Infrastructure as empire. Let me tell you about a port, a small, struggling port in Greece called Piraeus. In 2008, it was ranked 93rd among European ports. It was bleeding money. The Greek government, desperate during their debt crisis, did what desperate governments do. They sold it. China Ocean Shipping Company bought a majority stake in 2016. Within 5 years, Piraeus became the 32nd busiest port in the world, fourth in Europe, a stunning transformation. But here's what the headlines miss. China doesn't just own a profitable port, they own a strategic choke point. When Chinese goods flow into Europe, and they flow by the millions of tons, they flow through a Chinese-controlled gateway on European soil. This is the Belt and Road Initiative in action. $1 trillion, maybe more, invested in over 140 countries, roads in Pakistan, railways in Kenya, ports in Sri Lanka, power plants in Indonesia. America calls it debt trap diplomacy. Build infrastructure these countries can't afford. Loan them the money. When they can't pay back, and they often can't, China takes control. Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, leased to China for 99 years when the country couldn't service its debt. But China calls it win-win cooperation. And here's the uncomfortable truth. For many developing countries, China is the only one building anything at all. While America lectures about democracy and human rights, China shows up with concrete and steel. Pillar 2, technology as weapon. Now let's talk about something you probably take for granted, your smartphone. Inside it are dozens of semiconductors, microchips. These chips are possibly the most important resource on Earth right now, more valuable than oil, more strategic than uranium, and America can't make the advanced ones anymore. Oh, American companies like Intel and Qualcomm design them. But manufacturing? That happens almost exclusively in Taiwan and South Korea. Specifically, about 92% of the world's most advanced chips come from one company, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, Taiwan, an island 100 miles from mainland China, an island that China considers a rogue province and has promised to reunify with by force if necessary. Do you see the problem? If China takes Taiwan, they don't just gain territory, they gain control over the technological lifeblood of modern civilization. Every car, every computer, every weapon system, every AI data center, all depend on those chips. This is why America passed the CHIPS Act in 2022, throwing $52 billion at domestic semiconductor production. This is why the U.S. has banned exports of advanced chip-making equipment to China. This is why chip factories have become more important than military bases, because whoever controls the chips controls the future. Pillar 3, currency is power. For 70 years, the U.S. dollar has been the world's reserve currency. Let me explain why that matters, because this might be the most important economic concept you've never understood. When Saudi Arabia sells oil to Japan, they don't trade reals for yen. They use dollars. When Brazil buys machinery from Germany, they settle in dollars. When central banks hold foreign reserves, they hold dollars. This system gives America an extraordinary privilege, the ability to print money that the entire world needs. It's allowed the U.S. to run massive deficits without facing the inflation that would destroy other countries. It's funded the military, Social Security, Medicare, the entire American way of life. But that system is dying. In 2015, China launched the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Over 100 countries joined, including close U.S. allies like Britain, Germany, and Australia. It's a direct competitor to the World Bank and IMF, institutions America has dominated since World War II. China has signed currency swap agreements with over 40 countries, allowing them to trade directly without using dollars. The digital yuan is being rolled out internationally. Russia and China now conduct most bilateral trade in their own currencies. Saudi Arabia, America's oldest Middle Eastern ally, has discussed accepting yuan for oil payments. If that happens, if oil, the commodity that anchored dollar dominance for half a century, starts trading in other currencies, the entire system unravels. And when the dollar loses reserve currency status, America's debt becomes unsustainable. Interest rates spike. Inflation explodes. The standard of living that Americans take for granted collapses. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is basic economics, and it's happening right now. Pillar 4. Information as control. Let's talk about TikTok for a moment. Not as entertainment, as a weapon. TikTok has 150 million American users, mostly young people. They spend an average of 95 minutes per day on the app. That's more time than they spend in school, more time than they spend with their families. And who controls what they see? ByteDance, a Chinese company, subject to Chinese law. Chinese law that requires companies to cooperate with intelligence services when asked. Now, maybe you think TikTok is just dance videos and food trends. Maybe you think concerns about Chinese control are overblown. But let me ask you this. If you wanted to shape a generation's worldview, their values, their attention spans, their political beliefs, could you design a better tool? The algorithm decides what goes viral, what gets suppressed, what ideas spread and what ideas die. And that algorithm is controlled in Beijing. This isn't hypothetical. Research has shown that TikTok's Chinese version, Douyin, promotes educational content and limits usage for minors. The American version? It promotes whatever keeps you scrolling, whatever maximizes engagement, whatever makes you more addicted. It's not just TikTok. It's Huawei's 5G networks carrying Europe's telecommunications. It's Chinese-made surveillance cameras in American cities. It's research partnerships that transfer cutting-edge AI development to Chinese military labs. Information warfare doesn't look like propaganda anymore. It looks like infrastructure. It looks like apps. It looks like the invisible systems that shape what you think is real. What happens if America loses? Let me paint you a picture of what American decline actually looks like. Not in abstract geopolitical terms, but in your daily life. Your retirement savings, if you have any, are heavily invested in U.S. stocks and bonds. When the dollar loses reserve currency status, those investments lose 30, 40, maybe 50% of their value. Your retirement age doesn't just get pushed back, it disappears entirely. Gas prices, already painful, double or triple as the U.S. loses the ability to print dollars the world needs to buy oil. Your commute costs become unsustainable. You start making choices. Heating or food, medicine or rent, jobs disappear. Not just factory jobs, those are already gone, but service jobs, tech jobs, finance jobs. Because when America loses its economic dominance, companies don't need to be here. They follow the power, and the power is moving east. Your children's education loses value. A degree from an American university, once the gold standard, becomes just another credential. The best students go to Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen. English becomes the second language of business, after Mandarin. This isn't fear-mongering. This is what happens to every declining empire. Britain went through it. Spain went through it. Rome went through it. The process is predictable. Only the speed varies. What happens if China loses? But here's the thing. China's victory isn't inevitable. In fact, they face enormous challenges that could derail their entire trajectory. Their population is aging catastrophically. Thanks to the one-child policy, China will lose 200 million working-age people by 2050. That's like the entire workforce of Japan disappearing. You can't maintain superpower status with a geriatric population. Their economy is built on debt. Local government debt, corporate debt, real estate debt. The property sector, 30% of China's GDP, is in freefall. Evergrande, Country Garden, dozens of developers have collapsed. Ghost cities sit empty. Savings evaporate. Their authoritarian system, efficient in some ways, is brittle. Xi Jinping has centralized power to a degree not seen since Mao. No dissent is tolerated. No alternative views are permitted. That works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, the collapse is sudden and total. Their technological advancement depends on stealing Western innovation. As America tightens export controls, as allies get serious about intellectual property protection, that pipeline of stolen technology dries up. And China's domestic innovation, while improving, hasn't proven it can compete at the highest levels without foreign help. If China stumbles, if their economy crashes, if Xi's authoritarianism sparks internal chaos, if their demographics become unsustainable, America could win by default. But that's a dangerous gamble, because counting on your opponent to fail while you do nothing is not a strategy. It's wishful thinking. The choice we face. So here we are, two superpowers, one world. And the uncomfortable truth is that there might not be room for both at the top. This isn't about who has the bigger military, though that matters. It's not about who has the bigger economy, though that matters too. It's about who builds the systems that define how the world works. Will global trade flow through American-designed institutions or Chinese-controlled infrastructure? Will the internet remain an open platform or become a tool of state surveillance? Will innovation happen in Silicon Valley or Shenzhen? Will the future speak the language of democracy or authoritarianism? These questions will be answered in the next 5 to 10 years, not by politicians, not by diplomats, by the accumulated choices of billions of people, companies, and nations deciding which system serves them better. And here's what you need to understand. Your life is going to be fundamentally shaped by the outcome of this conflict, whether you pay attention or not. Your job security, your savings, your freedom, your children's opportunities, everything. The invisible war isn't invisible anymore. You're seeing it now. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The cliffhanger. But here's what they're not telling you about China's real weapon. The Belt and Road Initiative? That's just the foundation. While America was distracted by trade wars and tariffs, China was building something far more dangerous. An infrastructure empire that doesn't just connect countries, it owns them. And the way they did it? It's not just brilliant, it's unstoppable. In the next episode, we're going deep inside China's global takeover. The ports they control, the railways they own, the countries they've trapped in debt, and why every single road they build leads back to Beijing. Because this war, it's not being fought in Washington or Beijing. It's being fought in Greece, Kenya, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. It's being fought in places you've never heard of, and America's losing.